On last week's talk, I was completely out of focus, literally, on the screen. And I think that may be the beginning of something. I want to talk about this idea. I don't know where it's going exactly, but it's, I think, an important idea. And that is the value of the imperfect teacher. And wanting up front to claim that label. Not that I know what a perfect teacher is. I know there are lots of claims to that, and they may be right. But I want to put in a bit of a word for imperfection. One is it's a lot easier to be imperfect in the world. And striving for perfection often creates a very mind-driven pursuit that has something to do with attainment. That at some point in life, if you do it right, you'll get there. And that's a very Western idea. We're a very goal-oriented society. We give a lot of degrees, we get a lot of raises and higher positions in life. And then, interestingly, if you have the time to observe the passageway of human life in Western society, you arrive at the top of your perfection, and then you are put out to pasture in something called retirement, where every one of your markers of status and perfection are no longer terribly interesting to people. It's all a kind of a past tense. So the struggle for worldly perfection is doomed to a certain kind of failure, knowing, of course, that there's this concept of spiritual perfection, which is somewhat different, but not different, because it's still an attainment. It's still something that you might be able to carry with you into retirement. You can still have your quote-unquote status of perfection. The minute it's worn as a label, put on your sign over your office, perfect teacher, perfect person, perfect clarity, perfect awareness, you have locked into a state of being that is attained and in place. And one would like to think, I suppose, immutable. You've got it. Now all you have to do is hang on. But who's hanging? Who's grasping? Who's trying to do any of that? I think the true perfect teacher would be someone who is absolutely not reaching, not holding, not trying to get anywhere. And probably the best description of a perfect teacher is that they don't call themselves a perfect teacher. We're all hungering for something, probably called comfort, lack of struggle, lack of sadness, a kind of blissful state, and a lot of spiritual teachings, especially those that come from perfect masters, offer you that possibility. A state of permanent bliss. Sounds good. I will tell you, one of the things that attracted me to Rudy is he said, Don't expect it until you're dead. And I kind of discounted that because there were people who were offering it while I was alive. And I really thought, I would like this perfect happiness. I think it sounds like a really good thing. I would like this fully realized lack of struggle, complete surrender to the what is. And then, interestingly, and you've heard this story about 10 years ago, I had what they call an experience in which there was a loss of this person who wanted that stuff. The Bruce person just kind of melted away, and there was just this kind of being, and it was relatively content. I say relatively because things could unsettle it. You know, discovering that your flight was delayed at the airport for 8 hours actually would have a kind of disturbing quality. And then there would have to be something that was done to accommodate that change. And I would have to go, okay, we take a nap, we can go for a walk, I can get more steps in, I can have a nice little meal somewhere. These kinds of disturbances would be accommodated. And I would go, okay, a perfect being surrenders to, as Rudy talked about, the reality of the moment. You turn something like that into opportunity. Paul Hederman used to describe these moments where these moments of disturbance would come in. In my case, he would call it bruising or pawing or whatever it is, where the ego-minded thing starts to return in little tiny ways. And you realize, yes, there is no me in the sense of being a separate entity. It's like I describe it, the grain of sand recognizing it's one with the beach, the billions of grains of sand. You're not separate from it, or the wave in the ocean realizing it's the ocean. You're still something. You're the beach, you're the ocean, you're the infinite, endless reality. But as long as you're the infinite, endless reality, you're still something. You are total bliss. That is a complete definition of something. And it is possible that in being total absolute bliss, that one day you will wake up and there's no bliss. And that challenges the entire idea of perfection, of arrival at perfection. And that's where the imperfection starts to show itself. Somehow or another, there is something called change, transformation, alteration. Life goes on. Life goes on in unpredictable ways, and we all know that. And those unpredictable ways are either pretended not to be there, or they are grappled with, or you do this thing that Rudy called surrender or acceptance. There are a lot of techniques in dealing with lives that don't feel perfect, or coming to study with a teacher who is not perfect. What you discover is teachings of perfection, teachings that lead you on a journey, with this idea of perfection maybe being somewhere in the outer scheme of things, an attainment you will get at your deathbed, maybe somewhere a few hours before, maybe early in your life. But what you begin to discover is that dualities of human existence lead to imperfection. And you are either passing or failing, or surrendering and not caring. The technique of surrender, of letting go, of just being, allows you to fall back into a space of accepting the what is. And what you learn when you do that is that the perfection you're looking for is not down the road. The perfection you're looking for is not an attainment at some point along the way. The perfection you're looking for is this sudden moment where you're drinking a cup of coffee in the morning, looking at the paper, looking out the window, the birds are chirping, you're sitting there and you suddenly go, and you're there. You're simply there. It's perfect. It is perfect. You may get a glimpse of it being perfect, and you may not even get a glimpse of it, but something in you knows, wow, this coffee's good. Wow, this feels nice. You're not thinking about the fact that you got to get on the freeway. You're not thinking about the fact that somebody didn't call you last night. You're just there. That is a kind of perfection. And part of what makes it perfect is that the next moment may be imperfect. And recognizing it for what it is brings a certain amount of joy, and then surrendering and letting it go because it's going to go makes it a kind of philosophically rich moment where you realize perfection is something that dances with you in your life. It comes and it goes, it appears and it disappears, and somehow there comes a moment in this journey of being where you trust its arrival. Even though it disappears, even though there are moments that are really shitty and really complicated and not to your liking, you sit back and you go, okay, you surrender. And at some point, this little kind of acknowledgement, simple knowing arrives that goes, this is perfect as it is. If there is a universe that allows for perfection, even in momentary experiences of it, what is that universe? If you had to make a bet on whether it would end in perfection or imperfection, that may be a signal kind of where your mind is at, where you live. But the mere idea that there is something in life called perfection, that there are moments that you can experience it, that those moments have something in them that has qualities of, I talk about this weekly now, love, beauty, truth. I'll add things like simplicity, clarity, knowing, appreciation. Whatever those beautiful qualities are of life, they are moments of absolute rightness. They may last a tenth of a second, a minute, a week, a month, a year. If you're looking to find a perfect teacher, someone who experiences this all day long, all night long, and if you think being in the presence of that teacher will transmit that truth to you, good luck. I truly hope you find that person. And if you do find that person and they end up like dying or deciding they're done teaching or unable to transmit their perfection to you, where do you end up? Where do you end up? Well, where you are. You end up where you are, which means it's up to you. It's not up to the perfect teacher. It's up to you. And one of the great gifts that Rudy gave me, and I'll talk about this more in weeks to come, was he left me high and dry. Boop. You know, one day he's alive, another day he's dead, gone, finished. That's a big shock. The perfect teacher, although he never claimed to be perfect, and I know he was not perfect, but he left. On the other hand, his departure was my journey's beginning. My journey into spiritual unfolding was informed by his life, informed by his teaching, informed by his example, but it only really began when I had to do it by myself. And I've been working my best to do that by myself. And I have to say, some of it's been really great, and some of it has been imperfect. It is still in evolution. I really thought when the awakening took place that I had graduated cum laude from some kind of ultimate university, and then as I've said here before, I've sort of seen it now as the graduation from kindergarten to first grade. It's a step up on some level. You get a little bit more of a clarity of things, but there's a long journey in this lifetime. And the real diploma, if you will, in spiritual life is not at the end of the journey. The real diploma is sitting down with that cup of tea or coffee or Diet Coke or lemonade or water and sitting there quietly and just suddenly feeling, wow, that's your diploma. You may not want to think of that as your diploma because you worked so many years to get these other big diplomas, but this is the diploma. And I had those diplomas throughout elementary school. I had friends that I loved. I had dance classes that I really enjoyed. I had gym classes that were really terrific. I had art classes. I loved elementary school. I loved high school. The whole journey was filled with these moments, and it's taken me years to realize how supported I've been by perfection. That life has offered all these beautiful moments and awful moments. Awful, despairing, terrible, difficult moments. And the mind will say, one is perfect and one is imperfect. I would venture to say that surrender and acceptance at some moment or some ultimate moment will take all of those elements and weave them into something that if you sit down and go, for one moment, they will have all brought you there. All of the stuff you've been through will have brought you to, now that may get shattered again, but it will bring you back. It will bring you back again and again and again. I would offer, without absolute verifiable knowing, that if you live a life of appreciation, if you live a life of noticing the moments that are perfect, if you live a life of drawing information from an imperfect teacher, which is probably almost every teacher you've ever had, including this one, if you look at all of that stuff coming together, you will start to feel, if you are in any way happy with your life, that it's been a good ride. That underlying all of this, there is something there. And my postulation is that perfection is where we end up. By that I mean the imperfect perfection, the imperfect moment. You will probably die in the way that you don't want to die. In the last, everything's going wrong and you shouldn't do it and you can't get a breath and you're struggling and you're unhappy and God knows all the dramas that go on around the actual final imperfection of life. And then, pow. Can I promise you this? No. Do I believe it's there? Yes. Something happens and it goes, yes. So, your imperfect teacher is promising you something that may ultimately lead you to a kind of beatific and perfect truth. If it doesn't do that, then let me teach you that if you can stop along the way and appreciate the tiny momentary perfections, you'll still have a great life. You'll have a beautiful, worthy life. If you are looking for constant, pure bliss and you find it, give me a call. I'd be curious to have a dialogue with you. I have met many, many people, awakened people, unawakened people, and every one of them still gets strep throat, gets car crashes, you name it, they get everything. And in the end, it's physically uncomfortable for everyone. The great teachers complain. We're all in this together. We all share an enormous mystery. We all have a varying degree of insights into what this all is. But it keeps coming down to, for me, are you able to embrace now? Are you able to go yes to now? What does it take? How do you get there? What's the journey? And stop making it a journey about getting to perfection. Stop looking for the perfect teacher who will take you there. It's totally up to you. How do I go in this next moment or this very moment into a place of going, and even better, not figuring out how you do it, but realizing that it's actually happening. It's a kind of like, oh, and don't even stick too long with it, because you know what happens when you stick too long with recognizing perfection. Your mind gets in the way and clouds it completely. You don't want to sit there and go, wow, this is perfect, this is perfect, this is perfect. You know, I mean, I use this example a lot of, you know, driving down the road and hitting every green light. Green light, green light, green light. And the minute you go, oh my God, God loves me. Red light, red light. It's the second you get there, you're going to be obstructed. Don't walk around saying this is perfect. Take a breath, enjoy your coffee. It's so much more perfect than you can imagine. And it's going to have moments that will be tested dramatically for all of us. That's where the work of a lifetime of practice comes in, where you're really able to take all of what you've learned and use it to find a way not to get perfect, not to get awakened, not to get enlightened, how to simply arrive at okayness for now, at the okayness of this moment. How to arrive at the perfection, the simplicity, the simple joy of right now. That's the journey. If you're working that one out, you're doing a great job. If you're waiting for 20 years from now for it to all happen, ain't gonna happen. It doesn't work that way. It's not built up on years of struggle to finally get there. It's built up on years of good coffee. And I never even used to drink coffee, but I've discovered I love it. And little tiny things, you know? You know your things. You know your little tiny things. Enjoy them. Realize that they may look tiny, but boy, are they important. You know? It's the tiny perfections that build a perfect life. So, for those of you who want a perfect teacher, do not come here. And it's fine, I absolve you of all of your years of practice. You found an imperfect teacher. If you find a perfect teacher and you can really open to and draw from that perfection, please, you should do it. But in the end, it's being a perfect student that's much higher than being a perfect teacher. And a perfect student is very imperfect. Any questions?
First, thanks for what you offer here. It's, for me, so therapeutic and healing is what I think we do here. The concept of perfection for me has always been a struggle because it's so man-made and it so presumes that we know the exact image of what the future is to be like in an infinite number of images. Anything other than that becomes imperfect. And so, as you were saying, presence is synonymous with perfection, because how could you not be, how could it be anything other than? And the difficulty, I guess, arises is, like for me, identity is like the reverse of the Big Bang, where you've got this infinite thing, then boom, you just collapse it into something that you think is separate. And especially if you just add like a negative belief to it. And now the reality is that it's the tightness of beyond the reverse of the Big Bang. So that's why I enjoy coming here, because it brings that as above, so below into a visceral feeling.
Thank you. I think that's really well put. I really, everybody comes to a spiritual practice for their own reason. Mostly it's just to get to feel better. You know, mostly it's looking for answers to questions that, you know, people have posed for thousands of years, but, you know, be careful when you find the answer, you know, because somebody else's answer may sound good to you, but until it becomes inculcated into your whole being, it's just somebody else's answer. This is it's a tricky ride, and as you know, I'm leaving for New York, and all of you will have people here who will be able to help you sit quietly, Todd being one of them. And there is wisdom in people who've sat for a long time, being able to share their journey. I think the best teachers are teachers who are journeying, who are on the journey, who are with you, who have a flashlight maybe a little few yards ahead of you, who can come back and report on what they see. I really think you have to be careful on studying with people who are part of a lineage, who are trying to teach the lineage rather than teach their truth of that lineage. You know, and I see it around me all the time, and I have a hard time with that. But on the other hand, we're all drawn to what we're drawn to, and you'll figure out what you're drawn to. But the really important point that I think needs to get made today is it's your journey, period. You have to figure it out. The key is deep acceptance and surrender. That's the key. Open to the what is of your life, settle in, be real, if you're being motivated to do stuff, listen to it and do it. If you're being motivated to be quiet and still, listen and do it. Follow the directive of your inner being, because it is directive. There's a navigational system that I talk about all the time that's right here. It's called feeling. There's an intuitive thing in your belly that knows what to do. And there's this head thing which can kind of observe and clarify and feed back to the system. There's lots of elements in us that are programmed to help guide us through this world. And having a teacher go away is often the best thing that could happen to you. Truly. You may not think that, but the best teaching is your teaching. You teaching you. Because everything that this teacher says is coming from a voice that is just as active in you as it is in me. It's just you have to go hear it. You have to go into the place that it's speaking. It's speaking in you. We're all connected to the same source. I believe that. Same source. And it cares about each one of us equally. And it will inform us if we listen. And if we do the tango, you know, it takes two to tango. You do your steps, it'll do its steps, and you will be directed through the rest of this life with a great deal of love and compassion. Question?
It's funny that you would talk about the imperfection of a teacher today, because I remember that when I first knew you about 40 years ago, I frequently whined to you about that very issue. If someone in the ashram was not perfect, why should I have to do anything? Why should I have to follow them or listen to them? And that was even multiplied when I got the job working in Rudy's Bakery. And I was working for people who were, some of them were teachers. And I realized later that that situation actually served as a teacher. Like when you have an entire batch of bread that doesn't rise and restaurants are waiting for it the next morning, you can whine about it, but you're gonna have to stay and do it over again, you know? And I learned to stop whining and let whatever was in front of me be the teacher.
Well, I got to watch you do that over the course of all these years, and I think the proof again is in the pudding. You know, you've become the best version of you that I could have ever imagined, and it's really so beautiful to me. And now these new twins, you know, I mean, it's like it's unfolding, it's expanding, and it's going to stay complicated on so many ways, but you know how to do it, and you are the provider for others of what you had hoped would have been provided for you, because you stayed up and did the bread all night when you had to do it. You didn't quit. You didn't run away. You didn't go to something else. You committed and you stayed and you did the work. You know, I learned the same thing. Rudy died and I stayed and kept doing it for 50 years. I kept doing it. Why? I kept this house going. You know, I kept this house even when I lived elsewhere, so the classes could continue and continue and continue. You know, unfortunately, that can't happen anymore. But the classes will continue. You're all going to get an email this week about the Greg and Laurel's address. We're going to have a class at their house on next Sunday, just to introduce a new space for the class after I leave. And there may be other spaces appearing, I don't know, but the class will continue. Those who want to continue making an effort like this will have a space to do that. You will be surrounded by imperfect teachers who I love completely and trust completely to help guide you through their own journey to your journey. It's a great gift. This is not going away. I am going away. I still have teachings online. God knows you can listen to one YouTube after another for a year and not repeat them. And I don't know, I don't say anybody has to do it, but there's stuff there. I will come back here. You may come to New York. You're always welcome in the New York setting. I really will accommodate you. I will teach you. I will be your friend. I will be online. I will be on the phone. I will do email. This continues, but you got to figure out how to do it on your own. Rudy did not leave me with an email address. You know, it's something you commit to. You just commit to it if you want it. Is there a value in it? My measurement of people who don't sit quietly and spend time with themselves is that their lives are remarkably less satisfying. People whose entire silence goes to a telephone, who have to be distracted endlessly by their computer, by the TV, by whatever, they do not lead to a life of contemplative stillness and the quietude that brings a certain kind of joy that is worth living for. I mean, I say this ad infinitum, ad nauseum. Somehow or another, inert matter created love. Out of that mystery, my whole life is a search for how did that happen. Dense, dark metals, fires, matter in enormous upheaval evolved holding a baby in your arms and loving it to pieces. It created sharing. It created Monet paintings. It created a Beethoven symphony. I mean, on and on. How did that happen? I have zero answer, but I know when I walk into a museum, when I hold a baby, and when I listen to Beethoven, I know not only that it did happen, it's happening in that moment. And I am blessed by that. That's all I know. And I have to believe all of that arose out of something that is miraculous, and it is there for us, period. So we continue on this remarkable journey into the unknown with the understanding, with a little bit of imperfect reaching. We find moments that are perfect as a gift because you reached. So reach for it. Okay? Are we done? Okay. Next week, Greg and Laurel's house. Blanche and I will be back in June and probably have 1 or 2 classes, I cannot tell you. And you are welcome to come to those. I know there'll be kind of a note of finality in it, whatever that means for you. For me, it's devastatingly sad and full of grief. I guess that makes me imperfect. But I cannot tell you how much I love you and how much I will miss you and how much I will miss this home and this room and this street and all of these things. But for one reason or another, my favorite deli is closing. Whole Foods, where we get all the food for the brunch, has just closed last night. Things are closing around us, so there's a signal to me like, move on, things are moving on. And if any of you want to move to Red Hook, you'll be welcome to come and share a life there. Downstairs, there are a lot of books on the table. That is another purging of books that you're welcome to take if you want them. There were a lot of baskets that have lined the kitchen for a long time up on the whatever what that thing is called, the vent, the what? The soffit along the top of the kitchen. They're all down available. If you want to take a basket from our house to put in your house, that would be fine. There are plants that are available to take away from here. We're not quite getting rid of the big trees yet, but all the little plants are available. Just check with Blanche and take one home.
Including the ones here in the menu.
Yeah, all of these. It's all going. We're still taking stuff with us to New York. At some point, we may have too much stuff. You can all come to New York and get it then. But for now, anyway, we're taking stuff. But take whatever you like and enjoy. I'll see you guys next week if you're going to make the trip to Pasadena, and I'll see the rest of you maybe the month after in June toward the end when we're going to be letting go of the house. Also in the middle of all this is Blanche's and my 50th wedding anniversary on the 21st of June, for which we will have not a moment, I think, to celebrate, but we're going to celebrate in the fall. Ghost is opening, the musical is opening in Paris and in Madrid and in Florence all in September, October, so we're going to go over there for that and make that our anniversary. If anybody's in Paris or Madrid or Florence and wants to come, I'll get you tickets.
Also our exhibit in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, and we still have an exhibit of our artwork in San Francisco at the Laundry, it's called. It's on 26th Street in the Mission, and it's a great exhibit, wonderfully attended. It's really shockingly joyful. It's called An Artful Marriage. It's a homage, I don't know how it happened, to Blanche's and my marriage of two people who made art during their lives and somehow uncelebrated found a gallery that wanted to celebrate it. So if you find your way up to San Francisco, you might want to check it out. Anyway, it's been an interesting period. There's so much going on, and I'm not going to go into it all. I think people are getting tired of hearing me bemoan the sort of the sadness of all the change that's happening. On the other hand, I do see its perfection. I really do. And it will all work out. And the love, it's the last line of Ghost, right? The love inside, you take it with you. I love you. Thank you, guys.